Welcome back, folks. This is Asus from Asus Guides. In this video, we are going to be talking about the tactics of party composition in Baldur's Gate 3, and I will be ranking all 5 of the story companions available to us so far. If this kind of content interests you, please check out my Baldur's Gate 3 class tier list series that I just finished, and please consider subscribing. For you, it's just a click. For me, it's a chance at my fair share of the ad revenue. So stick it to YouTube and support the little guy, click subscribe. So when you're planning a party composition in Baldur's Gate 3, it's useful to start by asking yourself a question, which is frankly a question I find myself asking in real life all the time. It's, what's the best way to kill my enemies? Now, there are so many ways to deal damage in Baldur's Gate 3, but there are 3 strategies which I think stand out above all the others. They stand out not just because they do a lot of damage, and they do it very quickly, but mostly because they do all of that while being very resistant to luck. They're not RNG dependent, and it's that third factor that really puts them above all the others in my mind. So let's just go over these 3 strategies very quickly, and of course if you've been keeping up with my class tier list series, these strategies will be familiar to you, although we haven't talked about them all together yet. The first is crit farming. You do this by exploiting the free crits that you can get off of spells like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Sleep, or Hold Person. These spells, if you can land them, guarantee crits on attack rolls made at melee range. And so the fundamentals of this strategy is to maximize a character around applying the status effects on enemies, and then maximizing a second character around dealing as much damage as possible on the crits that you get from it. The second ascendant strategy for dealing damage in Baldur's Gate 3 is exploiting Create Water. Create Water imposes the wet condition, which makes targets vulnerable to cold and lightning damage for 2 turns. Once you understand the math of vulnerability, you'll see this is effectively like giving a free crit. It's a little better in some ways and a little worse in others. So, of course, you just have a character who can cast Create Water, and then you stack up as many sources and as potent of sources as you can get of cold and lightning damage. Then the final strategy is kind of the most fun and also the hardest to pull off. It's a strategy I like to call Dagger Ball. You start by casting the 2nd level spell, Cloud of Daggers, and it's going to create a hoop. And then you just envision all of the bad guys in an encounter as basketballs, and you want to throw, shove, or pull them into that Cloud of Dagger hoop. When you do this, you will double stack, sometimes quadruple stack, procs of Cloud of Daggers, which is again guaranteed damage. It always deals its damage. There's no saving throw to resist. There's no attack roll so that you can miss. It's just going to happen. So those are the 3 core strategies of dealing damage. And of course you want to start by checking off the boxes. Now you can build a team comp. You know, these 3 strategies aren't mutually exclusive, so you can build around doing all 3. Or you can pick one and really maximize your team around that one strategy. All of them are good. It's just whichever one seems, the most fun for you, or that you want to try out on a particular run. Once you have secured your source of damage, whether it's one or all of these, after that, it's just about doing the very simple things that raise your durability and guard against disasters, basically. So this is really what a cleric is for. I find spells like Bless and Healing Word are going to not only make you more durable, they're going to help you resist the really potent status effect spells that can be cast against you, but also if something goes really wrong, if a character drops, Healing Word can revive them. So yeah, that's the 2-step process that I think about. First, you secure a source of damage, and then you try to pad up as much durability around your team comp without compromising that source of damage. One thing that we need to say at the outset before we get into any of the rankings is that in Baldur's Gate 3, there are no bad companions. All of them are good. What really matters is the way that you use them. So if you hear somebody saying that Shadowheart is terrible, or that, Wyll can never compete with any of the other strikers, just don't listen to them. Listen to me instead. I can tell you that the difference between the best companion and the worst companion is not very much in the grand scheme of things. So if you want to take a companion just because they're fun, do it. You won't be losing that much mechanically, and that is, I think, good game design. I commend Larian for their companion design so far when it comes to balance, and I will say I'm also enjoying the companions as characters and for their story. I think Larian's doing a standout job on their companion design. Now, it's probably not news to you that as of right now in patch 7 of Early Access, there are 5 story companions available to choose from in your playthrough. Because there's just 5 to review, I'm not going to rank them in tiers or anything like that. I'm just going to rank them from 1 to 5, 1 being best, 5 being worst, and I'm going to rank them in that order. We're going to start with the best and go down. Now, I should say, I'm going to try to avoid any story spoilers, but I cannot promise that something isn't going to slip by, so if you're really sensitive to spoilers, you've been warned. First up, the companion that I consider to be the best in the game is Gale.
You're alive. That's unexpected.
If you've been following my class tier list series, this probably isn't a surprise to you. Gale has one thing and one really big thing going for him. It's that he's a wizard. Also, specifically, he's a wizard whose subclass we can choose. You get access to Gale at level 1, right? You can level him from level 1. And unlike other classes, wizards choose their subclass at level 2, which means you get to select what subclass Gale is. And of course, you have to go with Abjuration Wizard. It's just one of the best class-subclass combinations in the game right now. If this surprises you, please just go watch my wizard class review video. I cover all of it there. Wizards are the enablers of pretty much all of the strategies that we just outlined. When it comes to crit farming, wizards can cast Sleep, Hold Person, and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. And they are the only class that gets Tasha's Hideous Laughter as part of their base class. And then also, wizards can just cast a lot of spells. So they're absolutely essential to have in a crit farming build. It's honestly good to have 2 of them in a crit farming build. They cannot cast Create Water. I can't recall finding a Create Water scroll. Maybe I have. Don't hold me to that. But even if they can't cast Create Water, they do get access to really powerful cold and lightning damage spells. And the big one is Armor Vagathis, which of course you can only get if you find a scroll, but once you get it, you're going to be dealing a whopping 20 cold damage on retaliation, and then that stacks with the shield, the refreshable shield that you can get from the Abjuration Wizard subclass. It's just probably the best exploiter of the wet condition in the game, except for maybe a sorcerer, maybe. And then finally, they're essential for the dagger ball composition as well, because they can cast Cloud of Daggers. Now, other classes can cast Cloud of Daggers, but as I've said, wizards just get more spells than most people. And then, of course, they also get spells which push enemies like Thunderwave. So what I'm trying to say is wizards are insanely powerful, and they're really just the linchpin of all of the strategies that we've listed, and that's why it's so convenient that we have Gale in this game, a wizard that you can have on your party. If you did not have a wizard as a story companion, it would be really difficult not to just play a wizard every time. And honestly, I don't think I have completed a single playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 without Gale being on my party. I've tried before, it's just so painful. Even when I'm playing a wizard, I still like to have him. So yes, Gale's number 1, there really can't be another choice in my mind. Now, I will say, Gale is very far from being an optimized wizard. And so that might throw you off, but it's just that the wizard class is so good, it doesn't matter if they're optimized or not. You gotta have one in your party. Second place is another no-brainer. It's Shadowheart. It has to be Shadowheart.
Alright. What? Stop! Not another step or I'll...
Shadowheart is a cleric. And clerics are your source of 3 S-tier spells, absolutely essential to any playthrough. The first is Create Water, which we've already talked about a lot. It's the key spell in one of the best damage strategies in the game. But then they also have some of the best durability buffs in the game. Bless, of course. Bless is not just a durability buff from saving throws, but also an accuracy buff. With Bless, you'll be hitting reliably, and that's what I want. Fundamentally, 5th edition is a game about action economy, and then secondarily, it's a game about beating chance, and Bless is such a great buff for beating chance. And then the third is probably the best action economy efficient spell in the game. It's Healing Word. Healing Word revives an ally from death's door on a bonus action, effectively trading your bonus action for enemy actions, which, especially against certain kinds of enemies, is such an efficient trade. It can be easy to overlook if you're walking through fights and none of your companions are ever dropping, but even a good player is going to have some really, really bad luck every once in a while, and Healing Word just mitigates that. Now, those are all the benefits of just having a cleric, but what about Shadowheart as a cleric? Well, she's got her ups and downs. Really, she's not a very optimized cleric. The best thing that she has going for her is that she is half-elf. Half-elves get Fey ancestry, which makes them immune to the sleep condition. Absolutely crucial for caster classes, and clerics specifically, because these are classes that depend on maintaining concentration. And one of the most reliable ways of breaking concentration that enemies will do on you is the sleep spell. Take in a few stray arrows, you're sitting at 14 hit points, that Goblin Shaman's going to hit you asleep. And that's going to break your concentration, you're going to lose Bless, you're going to lose Hold Person. That's just not acceptable. But Fey Ancestry completely resists sleep, and the AI doesn't function really well around it, so they will waste actions trying to put you to sleep, even though you're immune to it. So that's the upside of Shadowheart, but there's a big downside, and that is that you don't get to pick her subclass. Clerics choose their subclass at level 1, which means your subclass is chosen for you. Shadowheart is a Trickery Cleric, which is probably, of the cleric subclasses, the weakest. I am hopeful, though, that on full release of the game, depending on your role-playing interactions with Shadowheart, you may be able to adjust her subclass domain. If that's the case, if we could, say, make her a light cleric instead, then she's even better. Another upside that Shadowheart gets is that she's actually the Urchin background, which is one of the best backgrounds. I don't talk about backgrounds that often, but Urchin gives you stealth and sleight of hand. Stealth is one of the best combat efficient skills in the game because it allows you to set up surprise. Surprise rounds are just extra actions in your encounter, which is very, very potent. And sleight of hand is used to pick locks. And if you've played any RPG in this genre, you know that picking locks or disarming traps, both sleight of hand, are really important. You want to have at least one person in your party who can do it. Shadowheart can do it. So not only is she really good from a combat perspective, she's also really good from a skill perspective. She has the essential skills that you need on your party. So we've covered Gale and Shadowheart, which, as I said, are standouts to me. I just consider them no-brainers as number 1 and 2 in your party composition. But after them, what we have left, Lae'zel, Astarion, and Wyll, are all basically 3 variations of Striker. Choosing between them is a little more difficult. However, for number 3 on our list, I'm going to put Lae'zel.
You are no thrall. Vlaakith blesses me this day. Together, we might survive.
Lae'zel is a fighter, and she is practically tailor-made to be spec'd into a Battlemaster at level 3. Battlemasters are a phenomenal striking class, as we talked about in my fighter class review. The big thing that Lae'zel has going for her is that she is maximized for strength. And it's really, really useful to have a strong, at least one, strong member of your party. Part of it is for a similar reason that you want someone skilled in sleight of hand in your party, which is that there are things in the game which you need someone with a high strength to access. There are loot containers under boulders, for example. Can't move those boulders without someone with at least a 16 strength, I believe. And Lae'zel takes care of all of that. But even from a combat perspective, strength is the attribute which helps you land shoves more effectively. And shoves are really good for, of course, the dagger ball composition, but also just for exploiting and controlling high ground, which is another solid meta strategy in Baldur's Gate 3. Shoves are very strong for that. And then, finally, shoves can just be useful as a bonus action disengage. If you land that shove, you don't proc an attack of opportunity, right? So building a party composition without someone like Lae'zel who can reliably land shoves, it can be really painful. But also, Lae'zel is a great weapon user, which makes her a phenomenal candidate for the Great Weapon Master feat at level 4, which is one of the best strategies for exploiting the free crits that you can get from Sleep and Tasha's and Hold Person. Why? Well, it's not that it does a lot of damage on a crit, per se. That is not a lot of damage compared to how much it does on a hit. Critting with a Great Weapon Master fighter is only, if I'm remembering right from math I did weeks ago, it's only like a 30% damage boost, which is significantly less than the damage boost of other characters, other builds, really. However, it's still one of the best critting builds because when you crit with Great Weapon Master, it allows you to make another attack as a bonus action. So crits are unlocking an attack. And then, if the target is still incapacitated, you can crit with that attack. The damage, once you factor in both possible attacks, really outcompetes everything else. Factor in also that fighters get action surge. I mean, you get the picture. It's if you can incapacitate a target, Lae'zel will kill them. She has enough damage to kill them. There's also like a give and go factor to Lae'zel on setting up crits, because typically you want to equip Lae'zel with one of the very awesome magical greatswords in the game. And greatswords in Baldur's Gate 3 get a handy weapon action ability called Pommel Strike. Pommel Strike is honestly kind of broken. It is a bonus action attack which does a little bit of damage, but also imposes the Dazed condition if the enemy fails a Wisdom saving throw. Dazed, among other things, gives that target disadvantage to Wisdom saving throws. If they fail that initial saving throw, they're vulnerable, so to speak, to Tasha's. It allows you to do this cool thing where, especially when they're in the same initiative order, Lae'zel can Pommel Strike, imposing disadvantage on the Wisdom saving throw. Gale can then land Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and then you can go back to Lae'zel, who crits for 30 plus damage. Absolutely incredible combo. Dazed is just a broken status effect in general, but being able to use it on a bonus action, that's what makes this so strong. And then, of course, if you choose to make Lae'zel a Battle Master, you will get to exploit Riposte and Pushing Strike. Riposte is just extra attacks on your reaction. Can't say enough good things about it. Pushing Strike allows you to push or shove targets that are otherwise too big to be shoved. There are a few ways to do this, but Pushing Strike is one of them. And so it allows you to do dagger ball strategies on even large targets like Minotaurs or Owlbears or Bullets. You get the idea. For all these reasons, I think Lae'zel is just a little bit above the other strikers that you can get in the story companions. Next up is Astarion.
Shh. Not a sound. Not if you want to keep that darling neck of yours.
Probably going to be the most controversial placing, I'm guessing. Of course, a lot of people like Astarion just because of the character he is, but it also seems like he should be the strongest companion, because he gets a unique bonus which is not available to any other character in the game. I mean, you can't make even your main character like Astarion. The details are this. I don't want to do any spoilers, but there's a story event where Astarion and Tav have a special connection, and after this event, Astarion gets a new bonus action attack which he can use once per short rest. The details of the attack are this. It takes a bonus action to use, and you deal 2d8 piercing damage at melee range to an enemy, and it heals Astarion the same amount as the damage it deals. However, if you use this attack while you are stealth or against an unconscious target, it will do no damage at all, but instead buffs Astarion while debuffing that enemy. The buff that Astarion gets is a +1 on attack rolls, saving throws, and skill checks until your next long rest. The debuff is the exact negative equivalent, so it's -1 on attack rolls, saving throws, and skill checks. The buff part is really interesting because, like I said, this refreshes on a short rest. So you want to begin your very first encounter after a long rest using this ability on while stealth or on an unconscious target. It's very easy to do this, especially with spells like Fog, Cloud, or Darkness, which practically guarantee that stealth. Then once you've used it, for every encounter after, you use it in the non-stealth way. So you get that buff, and then it's just a bonus action attack with a nice self-heal component. The debuff, though, is interesting, mostly because of the -1 to saving throws. It's very difficult to debuff saving throws, so if you can get this on a priority target, you're that much more likely to land devastating crowd control spells like Hold Person or Tasha's Hideous Laughter. However, I seldom save it for big fights or big targets just to debuff them. Like I said, I prefer to just use it as soon as I can, the very first encounter of a fight if I can. Sorry, the very first encounter after a long rest if I can, just to get that buff on Astarion. A +1 on attack rolls, saving throws, and skill checks is good, especially the attack rolls. Excellent. So, if Astarion is just a rogue, but with an extra add-on ability that makes him better, shouldn't he be one of the best companions? You'd think that, but in the end, he ends up not being that way. And the big reason is his class and his stat allocation. So let's go over that. Astarion is a rogue. And if you watched my class reviews, the rogue base class is pretty weak in Baldur's Gate 3 right now. Now, it's salvaged with the thief subclass. However, the thief subclass really benefits from being invested in strength instead of dexterity. So paradoxically, in Baldur's Gate 3 right now, it is better to be a strength rogue than a dex rogue. Astarion has 17 dex and 8 strength. So he's getting those 2 bonus actions, but in my opinion, the best thing that you can do with those bonus actions, which is shove people off of high places or into clouds of daggers or other area of effect damage spells like that, Astarion isn't really good at that because his strength is just so low. Also, Astarion has 13 in intelligence and wisdom, and he doesn't get a lot of use of these. Wisdom, of course, is decent for saving throws, but a 13 on its own is not enough to make a significant difference to your chances of making saving throws. The intelligence, I suppose, is supposed to give you the option of building him as a arcane trickster. But, as I said, arcane trickster, well, if you go back to my rogue video, you'll see arcane trickster, while it's a very good subclass, it's not good enough, I think, to make up for the natural deficits of the rogue base class. So the problem here is, even with this added bonus that Astarion gets, he's just not a very well optimized rogue, and that's the difficulty with him. As far as skills go, unlike Lae'zel, who's his main competitor, he's not really bringing a lot of skills that your party needs outside of combat. I mean, the big thing that a rogue is supposed to do, of course, is sleight of hand. And of course, Astarion is the best lockpicker and trap disarmer of the story companions. But having Shadowheart is enough, and you want Shadowheart anyways for her cleric spells. So if you have Shadowheart in your party, an extra sleight of hand user is kind of redundant. What you really want is someone with a high strength like Lae'zel. That's kind of the position in the party that's absent. At least that's how it is in most of my playthroughs. So of course, I'm not saying that there isn't space for Astarion and that you should always go Lae'zel, Gale, and Shadowheart. It will depend on the kind of party composition you want, and Astarion is a really great companion. But for the reasons I've said, I think he's actually worse than Lae'zel. In most situations, it's better to go for Lae'zel as a striker rather than Astarion. And that leaves in last place, Wyll.
Of course you can, it just takes time. I didn't become the Blade of Frontiers overnight.
And I feel bad putting him here, but someone has to be last. Really, all of the companions in Baldur's Gate 3, as I've said, are good. This isn't like some RPGs where some companions available are really just trap choices. The difference between the best, Gale, and the worst, Wyll, really isn't that much. So you can just take a party of whoever you feel are your favorites, and that's going to be enough. What really matters is how you use them to synergize with each other. Wyll is a human warlock, and he does get an extra, like a free rapier weapon proficiency, but there aren't really good rapiers in the game. There's one, but you don't get it till very late in early access, so it's not really worth mentioning. That extra rapier proficiency isn't doing much for him, because if you're going to be attacking, it will be with Eldritch Blast. So really, he's just a human warlock, and human warlocks are fine, but they don't synergize really well with other party members. As a controller, he's good. He can cast Cloud of Daggers. Extra source of Cloud of Daggers is always nice. He can cast spells like Hold Person, but he's just not as good as Gale. As a striker, again, he doesn't do as much damage on those free crits as you can get from Astarion from Sneak Attack, Lae'zel from Great Weapon Master. The kind of striking that warlocks do is really self-sufficient and not improved by a party for the most part. Warlocks do things like exploiting darkness clouds to gain advantage, making them very reliable ranged attackers. They do things like stacking Hex with Scorching Rays to triple proc Hex on targets. Very, very good single target damage, but not as powerful as the multiplicative synergy that you can get from setting up free crits on strikers with either Sneak Attack or Great Weapon Master. So he ends up being a alright controller, an alright striker, but not benefiting from a group, except in one type of team comp, and that is the all-in Dagger Ball team comp. Why? Well, as I've said, he is an extra source of Cloud of Daggers, and you can absolutely create Venn diagrams with Clouds of Daggers to quadruple up damage on a target, and that can get you through a lot of encounters. Just double casting Blade Ward with Gale and Wyll will clear encounters that are designed to be difficult. There's a certain series of null fights, for example, that just become trivialized if you're willing to spend the spell slots by Venn diagramming Clouds of Daggers everywhere. You know, it doesn't matter if you have a 17, 18 AC, Cloud of Daggers always hits. Anyways, not only does he bring Cloud of Daggers to a Dagger Ball comp, but you can take that combination of Warlock invocations that allow him to get pushback on every standard attack that he does with Eldritch Blast. So he ends up being pretty good at relocating targets. And then you can just build a relocation comp around him, Gale, and the 2 Clouds of Daggers that you put down in every fight. Druids are really good for this, because not only do they bring their own area of effect guaranteed damage, but they also have one of the few pull effects in the game, which is, of course, Thorn Whip. So when it comes to team synergy, there is this very specific comp that he works in, but he doesn't fit in very well at all with Create Water compositions, because even though he can cast Armor of Agathis, he's not stacking it with the Arcane Ward like Gale is. So his Armor of Agathis is significantly weaker. You won't get as much mileage from it. The thing is about Fiend Warlocks is they do most of their damage as fire damage, which has reverse, dyssynergy with Create Water, because Create Water makes targets resistant to fire damage. And then I mentioned, the darkness situation. He works really well around darkness, but unless you're building other warlocks in your team, there just isn't anyone else who works really well with darkness. So for that reason, I'm putting Wyll last, although he's kind of a special case because in certain team comps, he is really, really good. Second, probably below Gale, but he just lacks that flexibility, and for that reason, I have him in last of the companions. And that's it for this one. Thanks guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below, especially if you disagree. I love to chat about it. I'll catch you next time.